All right, I'm here to help you with the photosynthesis virtual lab number 2. Which type of light do plants grow the best in? Remember, all you got to do is click right here. It'll take you to the virtual lab. Let's go ahead and click it. I don't know if it's going to work. Oh, there we go. Hey, then you're going to plant some seeds, radish, spinach. You're going to put it in different color lights. Then you turn the lights on and you see. And you grab your little ruler and measure which plants are the tallest. Anyway, so you know how to do that. All right, but I'm gonna do this a little different. Well, if you don't know how to do it, just read the directions. It tells you exactly what to do. But I'm gonna give you some of these, but I'm gonna do it a little different this time. I'm not gonna type it because I know if I type it, you're gonna be talking, playing a video game, waiting for me to type it, and then you're just gonna copy it. Well, that's not the greatest way to learn. So anyways, you should do this yourself. You should know this already. The summary equation for photosynthesis. So I'm going to say it. First, let's look over here. What do plants need? Plants need light. Plants need carbon dioxide, CO2, and plants need water. Those are the reactants. Basically, it's just these two. They're the reactants. They need the energy from sunlight. But these are the two, these are actual matter. These are things. Where sunlight, it's kind of matter, but it's more the energy of sunlight. And what do they make? Oxygen, O2, and sugar, glucose. All right, so back to this. The summary equation. I'm not going to type it. You're going to have to listen. You have to listen to my whole story. But, hey, listening is good and it's not going to kill you. Your games is only going to take like 15 minutes. Plenty of time for games. All right, anyways, summary equation. 6 CO2s. You need 6 molecules of CO2 plus 6 H2O, 6 water molecules. Then put an arrow. You can just go like this, doot, doot, and doot. You got an arrow. The other side of the arrow, the products, what gets made, glucose, and its formula is C6H12O6 plus 6 molecules of oxygen gas or O2. So once again, it's 6 H2Os. Remember, it's always 6 plus 6 CO2s, arrow, C6H12O6 plus 6 O2s. What are the two reactions in photosynthesis? Well, let's look right over here. Wink. There we go. We got one over here. We got one over here. The first one is this says light reaction. I call it the light dependent reaction over here. It occurs in these green discs called the thylakoids. And the second step is called the Calvin cycle, also called the light independent reaction. So here's your two reactions, light dependent and the light independent, or the Calvin cycle. So that's going to go right here. The two reactions, the light dependent reaction and either the light independent or the Calvin cycle. Those are your two reactions. What's the role of NADPH? Remember, anytime it's 4 or 5 letters and does not form a word. So NADPH, that's not a word that I've ever seen. Those will always be, and it's right here. So you can see NADPH. Right here, you can see he's carrying these two little things that have a negative sign. Remember, anytime it's 4 or 5 letters and does not form a word, we're going to have 2 more. We're going to have FADH2, we're going to have NADH. They always carry high energy electrons. So for 3, put electrons. NADPH carries high energy electrons. And those are going to be needed over here in the Calvin cycle. Without those electrons, there's no Calvin cycle. Without the Calvin cycle, there's no glucose sugar. The light-dependent reaction occurs in we already did that. Light-dependent reaction occurs in the thylakoids. So first blank, put thylakoids. And the Calvin cycle occurs in the gel-like fluid outside the thylakoids called the stroma. Stroma. So thylakoids and stroma. 5, there's no picture for this, so I'll go ahead and just give it to you. The main pigment. It's why plants look green. It's this pigment that absorbs blue, red, orange light, but it reflects green. Green bounces off of it, and it's called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll. That's the main pigment. It absorbs blue, red, doesn't really absorb yellow very well, but it definitely doesn't absorb green. That's why plants look green, because green bounces off leaves and it hits our eyes and then they look green. Remember, this is just your hypothesis, so it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. This is asking which color of light do you think plants will grow the best in? You can put blue, green, red, yellow. It doesn't matter. It's just your guess. B is your guess. Which one do you think the plants will grow the worst in. Once again, just guess. Blue, green, yellow, purple, doesn't matter. Just put your color right here that you think they're going to grow the least in. Here's your steps. Once you go to this right here, it's going to teach you how to do it. Just follow those steps. You're going to grow some plants. So this one's already done for you. Spinach. Spinach in red light. One of them grew 16.5 centimeters. One grew 21.5. And one grew 17.5 centimeters. Now it says right here, to find the average, you add the height of the 3 plants and divide by 3. So to find, they already did it for you. It's 18.5. So 16.5 plus 21.5 plus 17.5 divided by 3 equals 18.5. That's the average. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to grow some spinach in orange light, spinach in green, spinach in blue, spinach in violet or purple. It's going to give you 3 numbers. You're going to have 3 different plants. You're going to have to find their averages. And then you're going to do the same thing for radishes and for lettuce. And you're going to graph it right here. It's got the little key. So spinach, you're going to make a blue line or a blue bar. You know how, so for, let's see, spinach is blue. So I'll go ahead and do that one. It's 18.5. So let me go with a shape. What kind of shape do I want? I guess this. All right, so spinach is blue. So I'm going to grab blue. And it goes to 18.5 in red, right? Red. So here's 18, there's 20, so 19 would be in the middle. So it's like this. So I'm going to go in red light, spinach, whoop, just like that. You can do a bar graph, you can do a line graph. So if you'd rather do, do a line that goes up and down, you can do that. Doesn't really matter. So you can do a bar graph like this, or if you'd rather do like, let me erase this. Or if you'd rather do this, you can just put a dot. So in red, it's 18.5. So you can put a blue dot right about there. And I don't know what the next one is, but let's say it's right here. Don't put it there because I don't know. I'm just guessing. And then eventually you'll add media, or actually add shapes, line. Then you'll end up connecting all your lines. Don't do this because I don't know where these lines actually go. It's probably pretty close to that, but so that you can have two types of graphs, either the line graph like this, or you can do the bar graph like I showed you. And hey, there's 3, based on what your graph shows you, you answer those 3 questions. All right, the other one was the floating leaf disc lab. All right, so we had 4 different conditions: no light, dark, plus distilled water. Distilled water has no CO2. This one was dark, but water with CO2. This one was, we had light, but distilled water, so we had no CO2. And this we had both. We had the things we needed. We had light and we had CO2 in the water. So we had all 3 things that we needed. We need light, we need carbon dioxide, we need water. All right, so let's see. Now, this one right here, it's dark, it's got no light, and it's got no CO2. We didn't even do this one. So go ahead and cross it out. Because obviously you're not going to have photosynthesis without CO2 and without light. We had two of the 3 had water, was the only thing we had. Couldn't do photosynthesis. We did these 3 over here. This one was no light, dark, but there was CO2 in the water. And on this one, we got 0. So after 1 minute, 0 were floating. After 2 minutes, 0 were floating. And after all 10 minutes, 0 were floating. So you can either keep going 0, 0, 0, 0, or you can just draw an arrow. It's 0 all the way down. None of the leaf discs floated after 10 minutes. Now, in this one, we had light, but we didn't have CO2. So we had light, but no CO2 in the water because distilled water doesn't have CO2. And once again, we left it there all class. And after 1 minute, there was 0. After 2 minutes, none were floating. After the whole class, none were floating. So once again, after 10 minutes, none of them were floating. So we're just going to draw an arrow. Now, I'll be honest, I did this 4 times with all my 4 classes, and I don't remember what exactly we got in 4th period. So I'm going to kind of make this up. So if you have the actual data, feel free to graph that. But I'm just going to, this is kind of what most classes got. After 1 minute, 0. None of them were floating. They're all on the bottom. After 2 minutes, also 0. 3 minutes, 0 again. 4 minutes, most classes 0. 5 minutes, most classes 0. And everybody's like, oh, it's never going to work. But around the 6 minute mark, photosynthesis was starting to pick up because after 6, most of them got about 5. After 7 minutes, most classes had about 8. After 8 minutes, most classes had around 9. And after 9 minutes, all 10 were floating. So since there were only 10 leaf discs, obviously 10 after 10, they're not going to sink again. In 10 minutes, all 10 were still floating. You couldn't get higher than 10 because that's all we had. Hypothesis, we should have done that before we did it, but too late. So leave that blank. All right, so number 2, what were the 2 manipulated variables in this experiment? The 2 manipulated variables were amount of light and amount of CO2. Those are the 2 things that we changed in each of these things. We deliberately changed them, whether it was light or dark, or whether it was CO2 or no CO2. So for this, I'm not going to type it, I'm just going to say it. Put light and CO2. Those were the 2 manipulated or independent variables in this experiment. What was the responding variable? That's what we were counting. Well, we didn't count much for these because it was 0, but we did count on here. We counted the number of floating leaf discs. So for this one, the responding variable, also called the dependent variable, you're going to put the number of leaf discs that floated, or just put floating leaf discs. 3, what were some controlled variables, things that had to stay the same between each one? We had 10 discs in each one, so you put same amount of discs, same type of discs. They were all spinach leaves. You can say the same amount of minutes. All of them were 10 minutes. So you can say the same amount of leaf discs, the same type of leaves, and the same amount of time, 10 minutes. Okay, let's see. Explain why it was important to keep one beaker covered. Not going to really explain this. I'll type it for you. It was a quote unquote control group. If you don't remember what a control group is, no big deal because we finished that unit a long time ago. So hopefully you'll learn it again in chemistry if you really need to know it. Which beaker allowed leaf discs to rise to the surface the quickest? Not only the quickest, there was only one that allowed leaf discs to float at all, and that was the light plus CO2. So in this one, you're going to put the beaker, or it wasn't a beaker, it was a plastic cup, but you're going to put the light plus CO2 water. So the cup that got light and also had CO2 in the water. So that's what you'll put for 5. Did any leaf discs float in the dark treatment? If so, explain this result. Just put no, they didn't. So we don't have to explain it. 6, put no, none of them did. Which state of photosynthesis cannot occur in the dark condition? Let's see. Let's go back over here. The answer is, so the light reaction is the only one that actually uses light. It uses light. The Calvin cycle doesn't use light to turn CO2 into glucose sugar. But the problem is, without light and the light reaction, we don't get these 2 energy molecules, ATP and NADPH. And without them going to the Calvin cycle, we don't get glucose sugar. So let's see, where was it? Which stage cannot occur in the dark? It's a tough one. Let's put neither one. Neither one can occur in the dark. Even though the Calvin cycle does not use light, it cannot happen without light because it needs the light dependent reaction in order to make sugar. So put neither one can in number 7. 8, explain the changes that occurred within the leaf tissue that allowed the leaf disc to rise to the surface. I'll type this one for you. Remember, I put the leaf discs in a syringe and I created a vacuum and I sucked all the air out of those leaf discs. And then when the syringe, when I put it back, when I stopped pulling on it, water rushed into those leaf discs. So the air came out, I pulled the air out, and then I put water in. But when photosynthesis occurs, whoop, oxygen gas is created. So for this one, you're going to put the leaf discs floated because oxygen filled the spaces in the discs. That water that I put into the leaf disc, I sucked the air out using the syringe. I let go of it and whoosh, water moved in. Well, when photosynthesis occurred and it created oxygen, the oxygen moved the water out. And we all know that air and oxygen can float. So that's what caused the leaf disc to float. And the last one, glucose is produced during the dark reaction, the Calvin cycle. Since the dark reaction of photosynthesis can continue in the absence of sunlight, that's not true. That's a false statement. Can plants continue to make glucose when light is not present? Why or why not? Back to this. The answer is it cannot. Glucose cannot be created, and the reason for it is I'll make this, I don't know, blue so we can see it. Glucose sugar right here cannot be created unless we have these two molecules right here. ATP and NADPH are needed for the Calvin cycle. Without it, without these two energy molecules, the Calvin cycle will not occur and glucose will not be created. So in this one, put no, they cannot make glucose because they cannot make the ATP and NADPH that is required in the Calvin cycle. All right, so do your best on this. If you have any questions, you can ask me on Tuesday. All right, have a good rest of the week, and I'll see you next week.